Good evening.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
Jarosław Kotowski.
And Dr. Jacek Bartosiak.
We warmly welcome everyone gathered in large numbers at Złote Tarasy in Warsaw. We are very pleased, as always. We meet with you every single year as Play of Battle to present the significant progress of the game. And today's particular event is truly special and quite unlike the previous ones because on Monday, October 13th, that is to say the day after tomorrow, the highly anticipated demo launches on Steam, absolutely free for everyone to download. So this is a very important and momentous occasion. And that means the game exists. Not the whole game yet, we'll talk about that today, but it's already complete enough to see what it looks like, how it plays, and to enjoy at least a few hours of good gameplay. We'll be discussing all of this in detail today, and later on we'll also be counting on your questions. We have a lot of material, a lot of footage from the game, there's plenty to talk about, so maybe without further delay, let's get started. Shall we?
Sure. Maybe let's start with the actual gameplay trailer, because I truly think the gameplay trailer will best demonstrate what the actual gameplay will look like. To udęć. And we'd like to say that you, together with us, are creating the community around this game. And today in computer games, the community is probably the most important thing. This is already the third event, and we're thinking about making it an annual event. Maybe at some point it won't be just about our game. Maybe other games and other studios will join in. But I think, Jacek, that the format of this event is very unique. It's not a trade show. It's simply a meeting in a cinema with the audience. Here you can see some clips from last year and from 2 years ago. So you'll also be able to see how the game has changed.
That's right. We also take this personally because we feel obligated to give a report on what's happening in the game. And that's just how it is. We treat this as a part of building the community. Also obligations towards those who have trusted us. And honestly, I'll speak for myself, but I think Jarek feels this even more, though it might be harder for him to say since he works 24 hours a day on this. The real creator of all this, and I want to emphasize this, is Jarek Kotowski, who is truly the mastermind behind it all. Of course, together with his team, whom we will also introduce and present today, and who have worked extremely hard, especially in recent months, to achieve what we have now. But this moment is special, and this meeting is special for me, this event, because we simply made this game. It's not finished yet, and it's huge, and I say this with real authority, because I've been testing it constantly over the past month. And honestly, just the demo itself is huge, as far as demos go. This is a massive game that required a tremendous amount of effort from those who made it. And we are very proud of what we've achieved at this stage. On a fairly modest budget, frugally, a Polish game studio, has really created something that already has very good reviews, especially among Anglophones, because we're letting them test it. Yes.
Here, looking at the screen right now, we can see the evolution, how much the map has changed, our approach. We'll talk more about that. We'll discuss it further, but it's clear that a community is forming around this project. We can see it not only now, as you can see, they've come here, but we also see it in the wish list we've been collecting for the past 3.5 weeks. We have pages on Steam. The trailer that just played, it was released 2 days ago, and in those 2 days it gathered over 60,000 views and hundreds of comments. And it's worth emphasizing that we haven't paid for any of this in any way. This isn't paid traffic, this is Purely organic traffic, so we can see that this topic is catching on, and our work is slowly starting to be appreciated by the gaming community. And on Monday, when the demo launches and everyone will be able to play what we've created on Steam, I think we'll see high peaks and what we've done will be appreciated. All right, but we've just touched on the issue of statistics, because when we start making a game, we often say that this is a very creative and imaginative part, but at some point, the crucial numbers inevitably start to play a certain and significant role. Here we're showing a game that's a bit similar to ours, Broken Arrow. It's a captivating game that was released in June of 2025, and it impressively sold 500,000 copies in its very first month. We just launched our official Steam page approximately 3.5 weeks ago. Here are the detailed stats from the initial 2 weeks. In those first 2 weeks, we successfully gathered 4,000 dedicated followers, while that other comparable game got 3,500, so we're actually doing significantly better. Now we already have well over 6,000 enthusiastic followers, but when we're talking about these particular numbers, we actually did a comprehensive analysis of the demos. We analyzed almost 6,000 demos and looked at the player peaks. The player peak means how many people is that? It's the maximum number of people playing at the same time in a given hour. And it just so happens that above a peak of 250, here are the exact numbers, 214, which is 3.6% of the demos reached that. Above a peak of 500, even fewer. A peak of 1,000, well, that's already 0.8%, which is only 50 demos out of 6,000. And a peak above 2,600, that's just 14 demos. Why are we showing these numbers? Because the kind of peak we achieve. On Monday, Tuesday, when the demo becomes available, it's not just a result for us. It's also something that foreign investors, publishers, and potential partners who might want to continue co-developing this game with us are looking at. Importantly, based on this very SteamDB, we can even predict later on, if the game reaches a certain peak, what the peak number of players will be in the full version and how well it will sell. So for example, here the demo peak is 1,000, and that's really what we're aiming for. That's our target scenario. It should give us the peak for the full version. 3,500, and that should allow us to sell several 100,000 copies at the high end, possibly up to 1 million copies. And that would be a success scenario for us. Demo peak of 1,000 on Monday or Tuesday. A scenario of moderate success would realistically be a demo peak of around 500 concurrent players. However, if we manage to truly reach a peak above 2,500 to 2,600, that would undoubtedly be a real home run for us. At that significant point, we could then confidently say that this particular game is well on track to sell a few million copies. But let's get back to the more realistic scenario. We definitely want to reach that initial peak of 1,000 on Monday or Tuesday, specifically when the demo officially becomes available to everyone.
Let me add, very important, why is Jarek saying this? Why telling you this? On Saturday evening, will be recorded, we'll put online, because we're just simply asking you to please go on Steam and kindly click the button. And for everyone, your families, all your friends, to click and download as well. After all, it's a completely free demo, so please click, generate those impressive peaks, because that's the real and true test. It's not about whether I personally like it, or Jarek likes it, or even if you yourself like it. It's truly about how much it's being clicked on Steam. And we strongly, very strongly appeal to you as much as we possibly can. And looking at the effort the guys have put in, it's not just about the guys, because there is also a very important and talented lady who is an integral part of our dedicated team. So please, I am earnestly appealing to absolutely everyone, whoever is able to, every single person across the entirety of Poland, to take a moment and click that button. That's the best thing to do, especially since the demo is about Poland. It's really touching, so everyone should really try it, go through it, see it and feel it, which, by the way, we'll talk about in a moment.
Okay, so maybe let's start with how we designed this game. Because as you said, Jacek, this is probably one of the most ambitious Polish productions, and definitely the most ambitious strategy game ever made in Poland, since strategy games just aren't made here. We're very often compared to paradox games. And that's true, because even in various presentations for investors, we say that we're filling the paradox gap, meaning the 21st century. Our game actually takes place between 2008 and 2025, and Paradox doesn't have any games set in that period. They have other games like Hearts of Iron, World War II, World War Europa Universalis, then the late Middle Ages, the early modern period, Crusader Kings, the Middle Ages, and so on. There isn't a game about the 21st century, but also our approach to designing the game. Our idea was that we didn't just want to create a similar game to Paradox, but simply change the setting, because that might not be enough to attract players. Instead, we wanted to offer something that Paradox doesn't give to its players, and that's where the whole idea came from, to introduce this RTS layer and battles at those key moments. And that influenced everything, including how we built the map here. For example, we can see how the map is constructed in Paradox games. The game is divided into provinces, provinces into regions. Right now, we're looking at Europa Universalis. Jacek, you also had a chance to test these games, right? What was your impression?
Of course, as the CEO of Play of Battle, it's a little bit awkward for me to openly say this, but honestly, those particular maps just truly didn't appeal to me at all. They were too childish, not fitting for the 21st century, and that's why our map looks the way it does. Although we'll be talking about this in more detail in the next videos, because here we'd also like to discuss the gameplay in depth, and specifically about the map, how you play on it, but it's completely different. It's about connectivity. Our map is about the strategic flows of the 21st century, about infrastructure. There are many layers. There's a military layer, an operational layer, a strategic layer, a layer related to the economy, to the connectivity of the population, to the need for critical infrastructure. That's not present here. In those previous centuries, even in the 20th century, our competitors' games didn't have this. In our game, no hexes, no provinces, just connections, like when you open up a map on your phone, right?
Because we said to ourselves that we want to depict the 21st century, so here you go. Here is Poland in 2004, and in 2024 we can see how this network of highways and connections has developed. In a moment we'll see China, which during a similar period, the railway network. Here you go. Yes, this is the railway network, but it's part of that overall infrastructure, right? So the beginning of the 21st century is the moment when it became possible to... You can clearly see that significant progress has been made in building infrastructure. We concluded this is how we present our map.
Connectivity is the key to geopolitics in the 21st century, where strategic flows are decisive. Our game reflects these strategic flows. You'll feel it even in the demo, but especially in the final game, where there will be a vast macroeconomy, where there will be currencies. They're already present in the demo as well, but only hinted at, because we really wanted to make sure it happened. A war. So we could show off the RTS and all of that in the demo, and the war for Poland. But what truly and really decides things, now you can even clearly see what's happening. China, the USA, rare earth metals, that's precisely what's in our game. And for that to exist, there must be ports, flows, strategic elements, infrastructure.
And this infrastructure connects individual countries, but it's also used in both the civilian and military layers, which you'll be able to see in the demo. In the case of this hypothetical Russian invasion of Poland, both our units and enemy units will move along the infrastructure. This will affect how quickly they move and from where to where they can travel. And also these battles will take place
in
virtually all cities. Because
yes, that's how it happens. It takes place along the route, along communication lines, along logistical corridors, and not some kind of strange fronts like I've seen, or like they used to draw them.
And while this demo is only about Poland, here we're already showing that in the full version, it will cover the whole world. Also, these RTS battles won't be limited to Central and Eastern Europe. They will also take place in the Middle East, and there will be Asia, the Pacific, the Korean Peninsula. And now we're moving on, as I mentioned, to RTS battles. We're moving to fact. We wanted to recreate these battles in a realistic way. Here we can see the Geran power plant, but there we see a picture in a picture. It's not from the game. That's a real photo, but the power plant itself is already
from game.
So indeed,
we really have it beautifully recreated in our game. This is the destroyed S8 route. If someone doesn't know Białowęka and Geran, this is the road from Białystok to Warsaw. Geran is on the right side, Białowęka was on the right side. This is the place with the heaviest traffic in Poland. Every day, car traffic takes place here. The Żerański Canal bridges and the buildings on the left of Białęka Dworska, those familiar with Warsaw know them, and it's the same with the others. They are recreated precisely. The Pilika south of Warsaw. The last operational obstacle before Warsaw. The town of Psylot, bridge in Psylot, Mnisev, the mouth Pilisa into the Vistula, historic places not far from where the Russians traditionally cross the Vistula, to the south to outflank Warsaw from south.
And it's worth mentioning here that in this theme, which will be in 2 days, we'll get 4 RDS battles. There will be Braniwo, the critical Suwałki gap that is Radzki Pilika, which you can clearly see now, and finally the decisive battle for Warsaw, specifically Żerań.
Yes, in the final game more, also Grodno. For example, useful now, I'll tell you why. Rospuda, Pak Palace, the Rospuda Valley, faithfully recreated the road to Suwałki. On the left side, the expressway, animal crossings, everything is recreated one-to-one. The drone strategy in future flew over this area very thoroughly. By the way, also over the Pilika River. And here you'll be able to fight your own truly unique battle, right? Exactly on your own terms. Braniwo, located 10 kilometers from the Kaliningrad border, Garrison 9, Armored Cavalry Brigade. A truly beautiful city that I know very well indeed. The magnificent cathedral, the historic monastery, the esteemed Hozjanum College, which was the very first Jesuit college established in Poland after the Council of Trent, and the expansive Zatoka Braniewo sports field. The whole of Braniewo has been recreated.
It's also worth mentioning that we did this recreation based on open sources. And for example, in cities like Braniwo, we managed to recreate it one-to-one. Practically all the buildings are there. You can fight over every building, engage with infantry. And last but not least, the Żerań district, which will be the final battle in the demo. Alright, but we actually said there are these 2 distinct layers, specifically the grand strategy layer and the RTS layer, where we have more realistic maps recreated one-to-one with incredible precision. Here, I'd like to point out that there might be some dual use appearing. So this means that it won't just be a computer game, because you can actually fight a real battle through Mech Suwalski with real equipment and in a real location, and see what the outcome of that battle would be. But how do you go from that strategic map, which is at a certain level of abstraction? We move on to the RTS, and that's when we enter what's called the deck builder, meaning we choose which units should appear there.
Yes, and this is obviously a true paradise for all those who absolutely love equipment, because depending on precisely how the strategic level unfolds, if we're playing the entire game and not just a quick skirmish, because it's important to note that a player who doesn't particularly like playing the strategic game can just play RTS skirmishes, then they can choose their equipment accordingly. Of course, it's different when you come down from the strategic level, because there it depends on which unit was caught in that battle, right? So the choice is naturally quite limited, but we truly wanted to create comfort and a true paradise here for those who genuinely love these intricate details. And as you can see, you can pick and choose as much as you like and create these battles. I truly think that there will be, and we sincerely hope there will be, a whole devoted circle of fans, those who genuinely love this. And as I have said, especially since the final climactic game will feature well over 20 intense battles. RTS style ones, including, for example, we know there will be Guam, the Chinese landing on Guam, and Grodno. There will be all sorts of interesting things, but even now these 4 I played just last month. It's truly huge. It's quite a lot. I think for a demo there's a significant ton of gameplay just in the RTS mode.
And there's a lot of equipment, because we plan to have over 150 different types of units. And these aren't just Chinese, American, or Russian units. If countries like Poland appear, then our own units will be included as well. Our native equipment, like the Twardy and various other pieces of essential machinery and other equipment. I
know one thing we want to mention, for those who are sticklers for details. The demo is a Polish game, starting from December 2021 after Lavrov's ultimatum, which is known from real history. It heads toward the war in 2022, hybrid warfare, and so on. Accordingly, the level of military art is as it was at that time. So drone warfare was just in its infancy. We captured the spirit of that moment. but the player, when we eventually finish the game, will be able to choose different technologies and military reforms between 2008 and 2025, and can go in various directions. Just as we say in Strategy and Future. A clear disclaimer, this is a hypothetical scenario. Of course, we tweaked the equipment a bit so that Poles could test out the Abrams tanks, right? And the equipment that entered Poland. But when it comes to the concept of use, it's the state as of the turning point of 2021 to 2022.
So yes, fans of military hardware will definitely find a lot for themselves here, but as Jacek mentioned, we can also play this skirmish mode where we play without that strategic layer. But we did have a dilemma about how to handle that strategic layer. To combine it with an RTS, because the RTS layer requires much more micromanagement, where you have to select every single unit. Here there's an introduction, for example, when we're about to enter the Battle of Warsaw, and when we were carefully thinking about how to solve this particular problem, we came to the conclusion that the optimal solution would be something we called the passive commander, which is a unique situation where the player doesn't have to control every single unit in the RTS, but instead only issues high-level directives, while the artificial intelligence effectively manages the individual units. So it will be a more passive mode of this RTS, and perhaps it will appeal much more to those players who are more oriented towards comprehensive grand strategy games.
Just to clarify, because I'm not sure if it came across in your statements, when entering the game, the player will have a choice, active commander or passive. So you can traditionally choose to set everything up yourself and fight, right? And for some, the passive mode is just right.
Here we're currently showing what the passive commander specifically looks like, meaning the map is divided into distinct individual sectors. The blue ones are ours, the red ones are enemy, and the white ones are currently neutral. By clicking on a sector, we indicate how important it is, what priority that sector has for us, and what type of troops we or the AI should send there. So again, this is gameplay on a very high level, where we don't have to constantly micromanage our individual units as much. And in my personal opinion, this might very well be a game mode that will probably appeal a bit more directly to dedicated old school players. But it will also undoubtedly be a mode that might be more inherently and logically consistent with the fundamental principles of grand strategy.
Since we see Geran, I have to say that I've played Geran many times, and I've always lost. That is to say, I've never managed to win the Battle of Warsaw on the RTS level. I managed to win Obraniovo once. I win Radzki quite often. Pilika is also very difficult. But listen, I haven't managed to win even once. But I'm not some great player. But it shows that it's not that simple. It is. Then I got so frustrated that I played again and again and again. And that's the effect we're counting on in the demo, folks, when you download it from Steam.
Yeah, that replayability factor will be really, truly important, and I think the demo truly offers a great deal. Many hours of gameplay, 4 battles. You can play the grand strategy layer and make different decisions. It's not a typical scenario-based game where we lead the player by the hand, so those several hours, perhaps even a considerable number of hours, indeed quite a few dozen, because you said it could be done, huh? A good few dozen hours.
More or less, at the level of a strategy game. In the high-level mode, you can really pull off some quite cool moves, like deciding whether to help the Baltic states or not. And if you do help, you can move into Vilnius, Kaunas, or even Riga, which I managed to do once. And you can even, if you skillfully play the hybrid war the right way and act quickly enough before the Russians declare a nuclear response in case you do something significant to Belarus, you can also effectively change the current regime in Minsk. You just need to successfully capture the strategically important cities of Minsk, Brest, and Grodno. And in our game, the Polish army is capable of doing that. I managed to do it.
And now, as you just mentioned, there's so much you can do on this level, grand strategy. And let's start with the fact that we wanted to represent hybrid warfare. That is, while other strategy games treat war and peace in a binary way, either you're at war or at peace. If you're at war, then foreign troops cross your border. We approached this in a completely different way. Jacek, maybe you could talk about this since you've played our hybrid warfare quite a lot.
Yes, right away, because those watching might think it's only in English, but of course there's also a Polish language version of the game. That might matter to some people. Let me put it to you this way. Our strategic game truly starts in December, precisely when the Russians issue their critical ultimatum, and then, following that, there's a whole wide spectrum of potential possibilities. How to play it out. Then the war in Ukraine begins, and Poland has to respond to all of this. On one hand, it has to strive for proper development, deploying troops, preparing, possibly mobilizing, taking care of allies, securing the Baltic, hence the pact with Finland and Sweden. Should we help the Baltics or not, since they are terrified? What about Belarus? Either they get involved or they don't. And depending on the decisions made in this broadly understood hybrid war, the impact is very significant, the range of choices. And what the Russians are doing to us, because we are already in their crosshairs after Ukraine falls, assuming a hypothetical collapse of Ukraine. We have to find our way in all of this. Of course, in the demo, let me clarify, we did it a bit intentionally so that things would move toward this confrontation, so that the player would engage in this war, because we want to showcase all our mechanics. So that's what the demo is for. But in the final game, it won't be immediately apparent. War doesn't have to break out if things are handled properly starting from 2008. And that's a huge advantage. I personally prefer to play on the strategic level, and I have unfortunately lost dozens of times. I've played this at least dozens of times. There was also testing, some adjustments, but generally dozens of times. And every time it's different. I have to admit, I really like that about our game. It's different every time, and it makes you want to play again and again.
We also demonstrate that, for example, Article 5 of NATO is not always so straightforward. As part of this ongoing hybrid war, we take both escalating and de-escalating actions that can, in various ways, influence our allies. And depending on exactly how much those allies support our cause, they might choose to help us in this particular war by sending their own brigades, providing equipment, or not helping at all. We can also do things like, for example, make a pact with Finland and Sweden, who at that time are not yet in NATO, and, for instance, secure them. The Baltic Sea, so that in the event of a Russian invasion, there would be no landing on the Polish coast.
Yes, for example, we could also resolve it that way. Certain things like allies being more or less willing to come to our aid. We have to behave accordingly. But we can also immediately take bold, very offensive actions. We also have the option of bombing Kaliningrad, completely destroying it with long-range strikes. Thanks to Russian refineries, we also have the possibility of sabotage. This is an open game, and I'm also genuinely curious about your personal impressions, because here we have a clear and compelling example of precisely how a significant battle is currently taking place at the border, and powerful long-range artillery is being effectively used to provide crucial support for the engaged fighting units. In this case, it's Russian artillery from the Kaliningrad region, and ours has joined in as well. Artillery. So here you have to, for example, I really like this layer. The overall atmosphere is truly great, and I sincerely hope that you will also like it very much too.
For example, as the game's creator, I see how this layer, this war, in this grand strategy layer, we can expand, because even now there are already several types of units. These are basic units like tanks or infantry, so for example, armored brigades or infantry brigades. But we can also already see artillery units like HIMARS. We can also already clearly see logistics units, which provide essential mobile logistics and have to adequately supply other units. Here, you can truly add a few exciting new types of units, and just with that make the entire war itself very interesting and engaging. What just happened? You can clearly observe that while we have these intense battles in a few key strategic locations where we can readily switch to a real-time strategy mode, in fact we can engage in a significant battle for every single city, for every crucial point. And just a moment ago we saw such a panel. This is what such a battle looks like. Here we can see that we're adding artillery to one of these battles.
And there's really a lot going on. In this war you capture a city, then lose it again, you outflank. There's a great deal of movement and a significant amount of life in this particular war, and it's truly quite fun to play. I really appreciate these solutions. I'll also add right away, this is merely a demo version, and we only currently have simulated air elements and some naval aspects. So some of it is intentionally blocked for now because it still genuinely needs to be further refined and developed. Furthermore, it's important to note that this demonstration is an ongoing work in progress. Similarly, certain economic elements are there so that the player actually plays through the war. And in the full version, this game will have a completely, I'm not sure if you want to say it now, full economy, currencies.
We'll get to the economy in a moment, but as you said, the demo is very much focused on the war, which is inevitable. You just mentioned the economy, because we really wanted to show how the economy truly works in the modern world, so we decided to base the economy on existing, well-established macroeconomic models. Here at the bottom, we can clearly see the EDAS model, which among many other things, effectively determines the prices in the economy. And these prices affect various things. This is a grand strategy game, so everything overlaps with each other. Here, for example, we have budget management. We also have to keep an eye on what kind of deficit we have. Here we see the so-called Laffer curve, which shows that we can't tax our society infinitely, because beyond a certain point, taxation stops being effective. On the right side, we clearly see not available in demo. There we have the ISLMBP model, which is a comprehensive macroeconomic model that carefully examines the intricate relationship between the interest rate and the overall output in a given economy. We also explicitly take exchange rates into account. So, for example, when it comes to exchange rates, I haven't seen this in any other game. Grand strategy, I can say with full confidence that the depth of this economic layer for me is on the level of Victoria 3. However, while these macroeconomic models are already functioning in the game, we decided, at least for the purposes of the DMA, to hide them, because at this stage it's really very complicated. And we still haven't quite nailed that truly fun gameplay experience here, so some things will certainly work and some other things will be locked. For sure, after the demo, we will still be conducting further closed tests, and it's quite possible that additional closed demos and focusing on the game's economy will probably be one of the primary things we want to do. Also, Jacek, when I talk to you, you too, while playing the game a lot, have so far mainly focused on the war aspect. The economy hasn't stopped you yet?
Yes, because when I got the very first playtest last month, I really truly focused on the war itself, because there's this palpable tension, the way Lavrov meticulously does it, and the Ukrainians unfortunately lose quickly. Simply put, when you're in charge, diligently handling Polish affairs, you feel absolutely terrified that you are completely unprepared. Absolutely. And when the economy is quite a complicated and intricate matter here, which we'll certainly find. To be honest, I didn't really deal with it very much, and we decided that since it's so extensive, it will eventually find its use in the full game itself.
I would just add that, as far as the economy is concerned, maybe so. In this demo, it won't be used that much, but it will play a huge role in the full version. Because the fact that we have exchange rates, we tried to use this economy to explain how the modern world works. So, for example, how the Chinese economy works versus the American one in terms of ratings. However, a certain foundation of this is that the Chinese have a fixed exchange rate, which allows them to be the world's factory and have surpluses they can use to defend that fixed exchange rate. And then they can pursue that fiscal policy, meaning they can have large government projects, infrastructure, expanding high-speed railways. On the other hand, the Americans, who have a floating exchange rate, well, by necessity they pursue monetary policy, manipulating the interest rate, and that's what this game reflects. So again, we didn't want to do it like other games, to do it in a very simplistic way where the map is just divided into provinces, you build factories in each province, and the output simply increases there. Our ambition was that once we finish the full version, so that, for example, students from SGH or other economic schools could literally learn macroeconomics from the gameplay that will be here.
Especially since the systemic war is simply about the redistribution of wealth, the transformation of the system towards the new rules of global capitalism. And our game, at its core, reflects that. Maybe in the demo, where the time frame is short and it's just Poland, it's less pronounced, but we do have it.
All right, now let's move on to the topic related to AI now.
Maybe let's let them listen for a bit. Target
destroyed. We left no traces behind. The enemy has no idea who's behind this. The team returned without any losses. We completed the mission as ordered. We are awaiting further instructions.
And that is the destruction of Nord Stream.
Today we are on the territory of Ukraine, where Russia has launched a major military offensive on land, sea, and air. There have been reports of explosions in several major cities, including the capital, Kyiv, Kharkiv, Fediz, Moribor, and many others. As the Russian government advances, Moscow has sparked further expectations regarding who might try to get involved.
Gets involved or attacks our country must know that Russia will respond immediately and decisively, with truly unprecedented and historical consequences in history.
Ukrainian leaders also stated that at this critical time there is widespread panic in the cities and extremely heavy traffic heading out of the capital city of Kyiv.
Putin has not only started a war against Ukraine, he has attacked the entire democratic world. His goal was to destroy our country and wipe out everything we have built and everything that gives us meaning.
NATO is activating its contingency plans. European Union and USA are imposing mandatory, unpleasant sanctions on Russia. Beautiful brands are preliminary. Water, gas are preliminary. Do you hear that? Sirens, do you hear that? It flows through the evening engine, and at this moment in which he lived yesterday, he lived in life. Today, this is the capital of power, in which there is war. This is not a local conflict, nor an operation. This is a real war in the heart of Europe.
And these were the things that we generate using AI. It turns out it's a bit of a controversial topic. Some people often accuse us that it's AI or perhaps even slope and so on. Well, but to be completely honest, our approach is that we can convey the game's entire narrative either through a substantial wall of text or simply a 2D image. After all, we are still a small studio, and if we truly want the narrative to be in any way more interesting, then we must consider our options. The way to convey it, for example, is through films. At the beginning, we showed that Formosa soldier, whom we generated, that is 100% made by AI. I mean, the 2D image of that soldier was made by us, but then the animation of the soldier, adding the voice, all his gestures, that was all done by AI. From our particular point of view, considering the fact that we are a relatively small studio, it simply and effectively allows us to do some truly pretty interesting and innovative things on a rather limited budget. Although, in fact, some people do claim that it is in some way controversial.
It allows, I'll say this as a player, even if I'm not a professional in the field, games, it lets you experience the atmosphere of the 21st century and really live it. Fizz film is the impression, you blow up Nord Stream, what could possibly not fit here? Right in the center. I've heard those voices, but I don't know if it's not just like with the Luddites when the steam engine was really invented.
At the beginning of the 19th century in Great Britain, there was a man named Ned Ludd who really didn't like the steam engine. And a significant movement arose of people who would actually run into those industrial factories and deliberately destroy the intricate machines to war. But that was, let's say, the reaction. On the other hand, for example, that Putin, who was just here a moment ago, he was also generated by AI. So how else could we have done it? Should we have recorded the real Putin? Well, probably not, maybe. Mr. Zelensky is also 100% generated by AI. And we can add this kind of narration to the game in exactly this way. So we fully understand that this particular topic comes with a certain amount of controversy, but at least in my honest opinion, in 5 years, all games will be using this. All right, but when we talk about AI, we can also mention that artificial intelligence within the game actively controls the units and performs some truly interesting things. And perhaps we could even ask Wojtek, who actually designed and developed this particular AI, to come in and share his insights with us. What will we find in the game when it comes to AI, both in the strategic layer and in the RTS?
Yes, first of all, I want to highlight the AI we see in the RTS because I think it's a bit more interesting. We started from the assumption that this isn't as simple a game as chess. We don't have very simple moves. Units don't move one after another. Instead, each of these units can move at any moment, in any direction. We have 3 coordinates because we also have units that fly, we have helicopters, so it's definitely more difficult. A complex task, we wanted to recreate as closely and accurately as possible what truly happens in reality, meaning the individual units themselves. First and foremost, they absolutely need to know precisely what position they're currently in, what their primary and main objective is, and exactly how they can effectively achieve it. Here on the screen, we can clearly see how these units are able to orient themselves in their situation, meaning we have influence maps The entire RTS map is covered with squares that tell us where a unit is located and what path it has to the nearest objective. It can accurately figure out what other units are doing, so their current position and strategic objectives are constantly being updated. Thanks to this sophisticated system, we truly get the distinct impression of playing against a real, live and intelligent player. Really. It's actually not that easy, in fact, to trick this particular AI, and I truly think that's a real achievement. How well it already looks now as the game continues to develop and evolve. And maybe someday in the future, we'll be able to connect the real machine learning directly to it. And in that way, the AI would actually be constantly thinking all the time. In real time, it would be able to learn effectively from its previous games, just like it happens today. That's what AI can look like in strategy games.
And that's quite a significant achievement because it's certainly not simple. AI that deliberately cheats, sees the entire map and just spawns numerous units, truly overwhelming us with them. So really, a very big congratulations to Wojtek and to you for your dedicated work on designing this, and to the programming team. I think that once you start playing this game, it's an RTS, you'll really feel the difference, that the opponent is truly challenging.
I'd also just like to add that any kind of constructive feedback, if you manage to actually trick the AI during the game to truly outsmart it, is very much appreciated and highly valued. To be completely honest with you, I don't expect a huge amount of new information, because the game is already really quite tough at this particular point in time.
And we kindly ask that any valuable feedback once you've played the demo be left on our Discord. And now the very next important topic that we would like to thoroughly discuss, and this is some significant news that will officially launch on Monday. Namely, we have successfully started a new and exciting collaboration with Bielik, which is a specialized Polish LLM model that has been carefully trained on the powerful AGH computers. Sebastian Konradzki, who is the originator and co-creator of Bielik, has become involved in working with us. And we've decided to truly redefine what a tutorial is in a strategy game. The core idea was born in a rather crazy and unexpected way. That is, Wojtek, who was just on stage a moment ago, said at one of our design meetings that when he plays a fairly complex strategy game online, he has the game open on one screen and ChatGPT on the other, and the chat simply explains to him precisely what he should do. Immediately connecting the dots, I came to the conclusion that we should have something like that in our game. That is, we should have a built-in chat that works locally, doesn't need to connect to a server, is trained on our data, mechanics and game systems, and is simply able to tell the player how to play. This is truly a very innovative approach. What's great is that these are Play of Battle and Bielika. These are two prominent Polish technology companies, and I think that as long as it effectively works, and we will certainly find out on Monday, perhaps we will be able to redefine a bit what a tutorial truly is in a strategy game. There won't be a boring wall of text anymore, and there won't be any excessive hand-holding. Click here, click there. Instead, by simply talking to this chat, you'll be able to find out what you can do in the game right now and explore the game together with it. Okay, we mentioned that we launched on Steam. Jacek, you also made your debut in the game's trailer? For the first time in your life, I assume.
Yes, for the first time. And that's the hardest thing for me, and you really had to work hard to convince me to do it.
That's true. Launching. If we're officially launching a brand new website, it's definitely a significant milestone for any game. For us, the actual launch went very well, actually quite remarkably well, since it successfully happened 3.5 weeks ago. At this particular point in time, we've diligently collected. Today, we proudly surpassed 40,000 in wish lists. As for followers, we already have those followers. Over 6,000. These are numbers we're satisfied with, but everything will become clear with the demo. What kind of peak will we reach? They had it there. And we ask everyone to add this game to their wish list. The wish lists are growing, but we truly want to have as many as possible. There's also the follow button there. That's the English follow, which sometimes can even be more important than the wish list itself. Because people who are on the wish list get an email notification when the game comes out. but those who follow are pinged inside Steam every time. For example, if we add something new in the news, or anything significantly changes on our Steam page.
Russian forces intervened and successfully managed to capture the capital. NATO didn't have time to respond. External forces will soon decide the future of our nation. This time, the campaign ended in victory, but you can reclaim your command. Do it and do it again. In the full campaign, you can choose from a wide range of global forces, including the USA, NATO, Russia, or China. You will be in control not only of defensive forces, but also of homeland and military units. Or you can choose any nation on Earth to fight for supremacy, join forces, and restore world order on your path to global domination. Join us on our official Discord server. Add the game to your Steam wishlist today, and get ready for the highly anticipated full launch. Cheers to everyone. Poland has successfully gathered its formidable forces and bravely maintained its hard-won independence. Your unwavering courage and essential leadership have been absolutely crucial. Still a significant power in the market, thanks to your decisive decisions on the political stage, economic planning, and command, the Russian offensive has been completely destroyed. But this is only the very beginning. In the full and complete campaign, you'll be able to choose from a wide and diverse range of global powers, including the USA, NATO, Russia, or China. You will face not only government forces, but also armies and weapons. Will you choose each nation on Earth to fight for an uprising, join the forces, and create balanced governance on the global stage? Join us. On our Discord, add the game to your Steam wishlist and get ready for the very full release.
And these are the videos that conclude this specific demo. Depending on how we perform in the demo, whether we ultimately win or lose, we will then see one of these two videos.
Yes, for those who were paying very close attention, I'll say that we put some considerable effort into carefully deciding what should precisely appear in the victory video and what conversely in the defeat video. If you unfortunately lose, Joliborz is really and truly on fire, not far from the Grota Roekego Bridge, especially Blisona Square and Mickiewicz Street, which are significant landmarks. That's all for now. I'll leave it there to keep you in suspense about what's on Mickiewicz Street.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we will slowly move on to the eagerly anticipated Q&A session, where you will have the wonderful opportunity to ask us any pertinent questions about the upcoming and exciting demo. I just want to gently remind you that our primary and important goal for Monday and Tuesday is to successfully reach a significant player peak that will be clearly visible on Steam. 1,000 people, meaning we want at least 1,000 people playing at the same time. The demo launches on Monday at 7 o'clock p.m. Polish time. I ask everyone, and I truly encourage you all to turn on your computers and start playing the exciting demo. Our ultimate goal is not only to make a truly great game, but also to effectively turn Poland into a significant hub where strategy games are created. Because we, as Poles, have quite a lot of extensive experience and notable success in making games like RPGs and survival games, but not yet in strategy games. And I think it's time to change that, to bring Polish geopolitical thought into a game and truly showcase it in a grand strategy. So ladies and gentlemen, let's all play it on Monday. It will definitely help us a lot, not only with what the game will become, but also with the further funding for our company.
So, and now?
Let's move on to the Q&A session. I understand that someone already has a microphone here. If anyone would like to ask a question, please go ahead.
Good morning. I'd like to respectfully ask this question. If SGH students can indeed learn economics, can't our adversaries also learn it? How then can they truly defeat us?
I understand completely, because this particular question has come up a few times already. For example, when we show specific locations like Braniewo through Meksuwalski, isn't that kind of a clear blueprint for, say, the Russian military on precisely how to behave in the event of a potential invasion of Poland? I'll just say that everything we do is based on open sources. So if we, as the Grow Studio, are indeed able to accurately recreate Ratsky, Braniewo, or any other specific location one-to-one, I must assume that a foreign army can certainly do the very same. Of course.
Hello, I have a question regarding the conduct of operational activities. Here the land forces, air force, and navy were emphasized. My question concerns both grand strategy and RTS games. Will it be possible over time to use things like the territorial defense forces and special forces at both levels of the game? As well as, for example, when the doctor sometimes talks about PMCs, modern day Lisochisi, and so on. Thank you.
All right, maybe I'll start and Jarek will add to it. I'm personally making sure that in the final version of the game, there will be Polish Lisochisi and PMCs. I promise you, just as I advocate for this in real life, it will definitely be in the game, especially since I actually have more influence over the game than over reality, most likely. As for the territorial defense forces, Jarek will explain in a moment how this was implemented in the game. In my opinion, it's very interesting. We also encountered some significant difficulties. We had to decide precisely how to present it while maintaining its playability. So Jarek, you can explain.
Sure, so the territorial defense forces are already present in the demo. Initially, these were independent units, individual brigades that we could move around. The problem was that there were too many Polish troops on the map, which resulted in too much micromanagement. So now, as a result, the territorial defense forces are assigned to specific cities. We have a mechanic called siege, which means that if the enemy enters our city, they don't capture it automatically. They have to break the resistance that's there. And for example, the fact that the territorial defense forces are stationed in a given city, we're stationed there. That will affect how quickly that resistance is broken. It takes time. Yes, it takes time. Here, we can even see this red bar. That's the process of breaking that resistance. So that's already in the game. As for private military contractors or the Lisochisi, which is also one of Jacek's favorite topics, they won't appear in this demo, but in the full version. In the full version, definitely, and special forces will also definitely appear.
Although things like sabotage, destroying enemy railway lines, and sabotage in the Kaliningrad region, those are already clearly and indeed part of hybrid warfare. Now, these specific elements, right?
Yes, certain elements are present.
Nord Stream, right? After all, we clearly saw how a Formosa officer reported that absolutely no one caught us blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, right? You heard it? That's directly from the game itself, right?
Great, thank you for the question. Please, next question.
Bartosz Gładzik, I wanted to ask about an issue that has already been brought up. Namely, it was said that all locations are primarily sourced from open sources, but I suspect that at some point you encountered a situation where you wanted to recreate something that, for example, was no longer publicly accessible because it is, for instance, critical infrastructure or some facilities where troops are actually stationed. And the question is, how was this problem solved? For example, when we want to recreate Warsaw very accurately and precisely, or for instance the town of Ratsky, will such sensitive and historically significant locations be completely excluded from the game, or was this particular situation handled in some alternative and different way?
That is, it's like this, because now we've been making maps that are in Poland and we've also made one map. Please, not that music. We've also made one map outside of Poland, and that's Guam. At this stage, we haven't encountered this problem. For example, in Braniewo, there are military barracks that simply look just like they do on Google Maps. Perhaps what we don't typically do is show what's actually inside those barracks, like making a detailed cross-section of those buildings to clearly show what's contained within. But as long as we can find something, for example, on Google Maps, it will also be in our game. Paradoxically, it's actually in those neighboring countries, for example in Belarus, where Google Maps mostly doesn't work or is very outdated, that there will probably be fewer sources to recreate something. But we definitely want to recreate, for example, the Battle of Ogrodno.
Yes, the bridges over the Niemen in Ogrodno.
Please, next question.
You gentlemen mentioned that the economic aspect is very important, and that SGH students can have a lot of fun here, but what about other students from other faculties like political science or social sciences?
Well, as far as that's concerned,
Will this crucial social aspect be taken into account? For example, the significant issue of universal conscription, the social response to it, and political disputes, because these are factors that are probably quite crucial in the so-called resilience of the state.
Okay, so I would answer like this. A comprehensive state management hasn't yet appeared in the topic. Certainly these kinds of internal policies or overarching policies will inevitably appear in some time. At this current stage, we already have the foundational elements of such mechanics. For example, we possess a core mechanic like stability, which is essentially a form of happiness, and for instance, how if we try to introduce higher taxation or attempt to reduce spending on social transfers, our overall stability then significantly drops, and this consequently has some negative effect on other crucial aspects of the game. So it will definitely appear in the full version, but for now, in this current demo, these complex issues of comprehensive state management are only briefly outlined in their most basic form. Questions and then
I'll add that if we have the full game where you'll be able to play as Poland starting from the August War, from 2008 to 2025, the player will have the entire comprehensive spectrum of socio-political issues to fully resolve, depending also on what crucial military, technological, and economic decisions they ultimately make, because those will also significantly influence something called orientation. There will be orientation, right? A faction that's more pro-American, more pro-European. There will also be a pro-Russian one, though it might start out very small, and depending on, for example, whether you order a nuclear power plant from Russia or from the United States, it will either grow stronger or weaker. And that will influence the possibility of military reforms, including decisions about reinstating conscription, creating a new model army, or other types of solutions. This also includes entering a nuclear program, for example, or another type of military nuclear initiative. There will be such development paths. Assuming that the player controlling Poland makes very good decisions, I hope that Poland will be further along than it actually is in 2025. If that's what you were actually asking about. So I think this will be a huge playing field, not just for social science students, but also for social activists, even for politicians.
Thank you much. Let's have the next question, please.
Thanks. I'm really quite impressed when I look at just how absolutely huge this thing is. If it truly works, then balancing it must have been a really, really tough and challenging task. So hats off to the development team, seriously. But my question, maybe to help clarify, will the demo have a separate Steam page? Because if it has a separate Steam page, then not only will I play the demo, but I'll also leave a positive review, since once you get over 500 reviews, when that happens, it gets an overwhelmingly positive rating, and Steam likes those kinds of scores. So I highly recommend leaving a positive review as well, if you play the demo, provided it's on a separate page.
Okay, so let me repeat once more. On Monday the 19th, the Steam Demo Festival begins. That's when our demo launches and you can download it. We won't be making a separate page, so at this stage it won't be possible to leave a review yet. That's the decision we made for various reasons. Right now we want to focus on getting as many people as possible to play the demo. This demo, or rather the whole demo festival, is also a bit of a window to the world for us. When collecting those wish lists, we surpassed 40,000 wish lists today. On average, 1/3 of the wish lists come from Poland, 2/3 from abroad, so Poland is kind of the driving force. I assume that this proportion will continue to shift away from Poland, meaning the game will become increasingly well known in the West, outside of Poland. But in fact, the fact that a lot of people will play on Monday and Tuesday will mean that during this festival, Steam's algorithms will already push us quite high in all those demo rankings starting from Wednesday. That's why it's so important, once again, that we all play together on Monday at 7:00 p.m.
Thank you, because playing through it is truly quite important indeed. The second thing, well, I'm not surprised either, because since it's a demo, there could have been some Russian trolls who might rate it negatively. I mean, that's also something to consider when it comes strictly to ratings. And there's another question. Is the plan still for the game to be published by you? Are you no longer looking for any publishing support at all?
For now, yes. We're not hiding the fact that even after launching the Steam page, the first publishers started reaching out to us. Half jokingly, half seriously. I'll say that the publisher of Broken Arrow contacted us, that is, the publisher of that game, An RTS where there's a NATO-Russia conflict and they're interested in working with us. At this stage, we're leaning more towards the scenario of publishing the game ourselves and continuing to finance the company independently. However, everything depends on what offers we receive and what exactly would be behind such an offer. If in fact the entity we could potentially cooperate with were able to convince us that thanks to such cooperation the game would become known worldwide, a very ambitious game, then we could consider such a proposal. Thank you for the question. Please go ahead with the next one.
What will the price of the game be?
Of the full version, the complete full version will probably be around $60 because I truly think that if we're offering a game as big as a Paradox game, which also has this significant component of real-time strategy, then a full price of $60 is definitely and absolutely justified. Thank you. Go ahead with the next question.
Good evening, Robert Siwech here. I have a question. You previously stated that you plan to make it entirely possible to play as any country. It truly seems to me that this is super difficult to achieve. It will be ambitious to prepare such a background for every country. Every country has its own unique specifics, socially, financially, and some kind of broader geopolitical context. In fact, realistically assuming that the game will one day be complete, how will that look? Which countries will those be?
Okay, so if I could refer again to the experience of Paradox games, for example, Hearts of Iron, which came out, it's a game about World War II that was released in 2016. In September, if I remember correctly, at the beginning you could play as any country, but 6 countries had unique content. And then over time, as the game developed, unique content was added for more countries. And that's exactly how we intend to do it. On the day the full version is released, you'll be able to play as any country, but 6 countries will have unique content. These will be the 3 main powers, meaning the United States, China and Russia, plus Poland, Ukraine and Turkey. But releasing the first game, releasing the full version, is not the end of our work on the game. We are planning to support and develop this game for many years after its release. And as part of this ongoing development, other countries will definitely receive unique content as well. Thank you much. Please go ahead with the next question.
First of all, I would like to add to what the previous speaker said that, as far as I remember, Steam accounts are free. And you can also easily download and thoughtfully rate from multiple different accounts, so I strongly encourage you to do so.
To be honest, I don't encourage that because I'm not sure how it works. It has to comply with Steam's terms of service, and we also want to get real market-based results for ourselves, so we know how many people are actually playing, not just that everyone launches it on 5 different computers.
Of course, but if it's an account with a history, then why not? Preferably on a single computer. I'd like to ask, did you consider including the state in the game? The influence of broadly understood corporatism and widespread social surveillance and the social credit system that's starting to emerge here and there in the future?
We haven't currently taken that into consideration yet, but it's quite possible that when we create unique content for China, that will be one of the mechanics that appears there.
Remember, our game officially ends in the year 2025, so it's truly impossible to fit absolutely everything in, because during that significant time period, of course, since 2008, when certain decisions are made, Poland could have been much further along, but still, 2025, though that doesn't mean there won't be DLCs, mods, and generally the next parts of the game if it turns out to be a commercial success.
And I would also like to say at a high level what our goals are related to this game with this company. So obviously when we release this game, we want to support it for many years after launch. We already even have ideas for a 2nd and 3rd installment of this game. But also, importantly, we really want to become a hub here in Poland for producing strategy games, because we believe that this will encourage other Polish companies to get involved in this field as well. If a country the size of Sweden, which actually has a significantly smaller population than us, is truly able to become a global leader in the production of grand strategy games, it means that Poland has even greater potential, and these are also our ambitions. Thank you. Let's move on to the next question.
I have just one important question, because here in general the entire game is being presented, which From the comprehensive materials that have been clearly shown here, it thoroughly covers a lot of very general, specific micro and broader macroeconomic issues. Additionally, there's also the real-time strategy RTS aspect here. I wanted to ask, isn't that perhaps a bit too much? I mean, isn't there a significant risk that simply too much content will be imposed upon the player, which will ultimately result in negative feelings associated with this game?
Maybe I'll answer Jarek. Jarek will add something in a moment. I'm not a gamer, right? And I've been testing this game for a month now, and I'm really enjoying it. And I didn't feel at all overwhelmed, and I have to admit, when I played last year and 6 months ago, the competitors game about the 20th century, I saw that immense wall of text, and honestly, I started yawning and didn't feel like getting into it at all, right? But I was forced by the team, well, because we had to compare. I won't hide the fact that our game is light, relatively speaking, right? When you play the demo, I understand the question was about the demo because it's hard to talk about the whole game for now, so I still encourage you to try playing it, because that issue will definitely be resolved in 2 to 3 days, the one you're asking about. I've already made up my mind about it, at least personally.
Well, I would just say that the problem with these games, meaning grand strategy games, is that they have to be sufficiently deep. It's not just some simple shooter, and if they're sufficiently deep, it's because they have a multitude of mechanics and systems. And these mechanics and systems have to interconnect. So I would be more concerned about the risks. For example, it is possible that these systems might be too weakly connected to each other, or perhaps too weakly. We will certainly explain these connections in more detail, but I think so far we've successfully managed to capture the essence, what a good grand strategy should have in it. Thank you for the question. Do we have any more questions?
Yes, I have 2 quick questions. Regarding the RTS aspect, my primary question is, when capturing various sectors, will there be truly special sectors, for example, a prominent communications tower that will genuinely give us more of that valuable intel you previously showed, but to actually utilize it, to consistently get that little strategic bonus every few seconds? For example, will you have to capture a power plant or something quite similar to that? And my second important question is about the strategic layer. Is it truly possible to have such incredibly strong political or economic pressure, for example, from the United States, in a situation where we would want to take over the Kaliningrad region, depending on the arrangement we choose? And that, for example, it simply won't be possible to do this because the game just won't let us, right? Just no, or if it does, there will be economic repercussions. Or some kind of ban on various types of weapons and so on.
At the moment in the demo, regarding the second question, right now in the demo, if we act too independently towards Russia and Belarus, escalating, taking actions, if we take actions that the Americans wouldn't like in terms of escalation, they simply don't come to our aid, and that really matters, okay? That really matters because we simply have few forces, relatively few. And I myself have caught myself, as you know, a passionate advocate, I would say, of a skeptical attitude, wondering whether the Americans would actually come to our aid. I won't hide that when I played this game, I really bent over backwards to make sure they would come as much as possible. Everyone from the West, because I was losing every war in the first 2 weeks. Just by the way, right? It's really very complex. A hybrid war in which we really try to make them come. That's half joking, half serious. Once I played such a campaign on purpose, because it's incredibly hard to get the Germans to actually move. I mean, I've personally played about 50 of these extensive campaigns and they never really moved, because you absolutely have to reach a certain score and then get into the green zone, simply depending on your specific actions. So those Germans are always dissatisfied with what Poland is doing. I really went all out just to get those 10 points, because that's the score you need. And they finally moved, but I basically had to go all out, lie down flat, do everything possible and so on. And even that didn't really change much. So that's my answer. Our designers here did a really great job. I really like it because there's this real manipulation with the allies, just like it would be in real life, in my opinion.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you have to play the game and see if maybe your powers of persuasion with our allies will be much more effective than Jacek's powers of persuasion. And to answer the first question about those sectors, because now the sectors are already different. For example, we have open and closed sectors. Closed sectors are urban sectors where, for example, there is a building in the middle, and to capture such a closed sector, we have to use infantry. And for example, an open sector can be captured using infantry, a tank, an armored vehicle, anything really. So in this way, we're already showing that infantry is meant for urban combat, that it really has its own specific use. And here, as we see this power plant in Geran, such large structures also appear in the game. It's not just one big building that a single infantry squad enters, it's actually divided into sections and you can fight over each individual part. It's even possible in the game for part of this power plant to be occupied by Polish units, while another part is held by Russian forces. And that's exactly what we'll be fighting for. This power plant will be contested. Already now, so-called side objectives are appearing in the game. And right here on this detailed map, where we clearly see the district of Geran, at the very beginning there will be a crucial side objective. You'll have to carefully escort elite Polish special forces to a specific point within our designated sector, because these highly trained special forces are carrying vital intel they've successfully obtained from the Russian forces. As for other types of sectors, at this stage they won't appear in the demo yet. We will definitely discuss whether things like those towers or what was touched upon, or maybe should be in the full version. Thank you very much. Please ask another question.
Good evening, Stanisław Żółski. I have such a question. At the grand strategy level, if I were playing as Turkey and made a purchase, like Turkey did with the air defense system from Russia, would I then be cut off from NATO weapon systems? Will this be included in the full game? And second, a quick question regarding the gameplay we're seeing on the screen. Is it actually this fast or is it sped up? Will it be a bit slower? How will it look in the game?
As for the second question, we actually have the option to set the pacing there. So for example, here the game is already running at a slightly higher speed, not the default one, so the player will be able to decide for themselves, because if someone is playing this layer, grand strategy, that's what the passive commander is for, to be able to conduct battles a bit faster than in a full RTS. And it will also be possible to speed it up, so no one will be forced to spend a lot of time in the RTS if they don't want to. And as for the details regarding Turkey, well, we haven't designed Turkey yet. For now, we've essentially done Poland. However, as Jacek mentioned, in this hybrid war, the principle when we design this game is that every action has its own consequences, right? If we were to blow up the Nord Stream pipeline and subsequently get caught, well, we would probably not receive any military aid whatsoever from Germany.
Let me add two little tidbits that you might like. Since the Americans are already involved, imagine that a Polish game studio, that is us, made it so that we command the Americans in this war. So we use them as if they were our own. And that's very enjoyable. We'll see what the reviews in the States will be like in this regard.
Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
It's also worth mentioning that several Western YouTubers have already played the game because they already got the build. They received it just before the weekend. And so far their reviews have been positive.
Yes, and let me add, regarding that question about speed, I really do see here that it's noticeably faster. I'm playing this RTS game normally, so the pace is quite normal for me, so you'll also be able to play at a normal speed. That's it.
Thank you. Please, next question.
Good morning. I have a rather quick question regarding the RTS. Are there any current plans to include amphibious vehicles, such as, for example, the BWP Borsuk, in this specific layer? And do you also plan to implement field fortifications in any form whatsoever, or perhaps even more broadly? And will it actually be possible to some extent to truly create a positional war? Or will it be, as I clearly see here, rather more of a maneuver warfare, right? Yes, indeed. Forced. And another question, how long will the demo be available to play?
The demo will be available for the duration of the festival, so it starts on Monday at 7 o'clock p.m. Polish time and lasts until Sunday, until the end of the day. But we encourage you to start playing the demo on Monday at 7 o'clock p.m. You can really play for many hours. As Jacek confirmed, that's why it's worth starting to play already on Monday evening.
As for those previous questions,
The badges are already in.
The badges are in, and I really like badges in an RTS in our game. I have to admit, they also look really, really nice indeed.
And as for how we would like to push this RTS forward, as Jacek mentioned earlier, this year we're at 22 and we're showing that battlefield where drones are already present to some extent because we have some scout drones, we even have drone units in the demo, but it's definitely not a drone-focused game. The battlefield, this is not what we see in Ukraine in 1925.
Imagine, if you will, that this is the scenario where the Russians have successfully captured Kiev according to their plan. So their maneuver warfare and their battalion tactical groups have proven effective, and that's the kind of battlefield we have. However, in the final version of the game, we will include everything you asked about because we want to reflect exactly this transformation, this revolution in military affairs. And whoever catches on to this, instead of buying lots of tanks, will probably have the advantage by the end of the game. That's what we want to capture. I won't hide it. In fact, I think I've only said this once before. To Warek, I said that because in my opinion, every strategy game, if it is to have any educational value, it must include a major meta trend, because the history of the world is made up of meta trends. The chariot. The war chariot changed the balance of power in the Middle East. The mastery of horseback riding by steppe peoples changed the relationship between the Roman Empire and the barbarians. Later in the Middle Ages, gunpowder and other innovations also changed these dynamics. Yes, between powers. And now we are also witnessing a meta trend, and I want to talk about it. And our game will also be played out on it. I only talked about it with Jarek once. Actually, I even want the design team to hear this. So in 2008, we were still in a situation where the Americans could easily carry out, it would seem, projects. The meta trend is that democratization and proliferation are taking place. And the cost of precision strike capabilities is dropping thanks to the availability of software, which we can now see in Ukraine. This means that great powers are losing the advantages that used to be automatically guaranteed by their size, both demographic and industrial production advantages. That's why the Russians didn't take Kiev. They failed, right? There, the masses were stopped, the concentration of force was halted. Precisely because of this, the beginnings of what I mentioned, this meta trend. But unfortunately, the same thing applies, and this is exactly the problem with the article. And faith in the rise, the projection of American forces, which are having trouble overcoming the Houthis, are having trouble projecting power over long distances. In the face of this wall of proliferation, democratization, and the spread of precision weapons. And this is a trend that will also shape real life. And in our game, I would also like to see these new political and social conditions reflected. Because smaller and medium-sized countries now have the ability to stand up to the great powers. So it's different from the zeitgeist of paradox games and games in general. And not just in games, but in life itself, as it might seem. Yes, back when there were hundreds of divisions and armies numbering in the millions. And we need to understand this zeitgeist and this meta trend. And if our game is to serve as a medium with an educational dimension, I would like it to reflect that, because the years 2008 to 2025 are exactly the crystallization of this significant trend. And whoever truly follows this trend will be a winner in life, which is what I sincerely wish for our homeland. For now, that's not happening, neither in life nor in the game.
Jacek, but before we move on to the next question, we forgot to mention something very important, something fundamental, because we've changed the name of the game.
Yes.
Yes, because the company is still called Play of Battle, and a year ago, 2 years ago, when we were presenting the project, it was the POB project. However, right before the Steam page launched, we came to the conclusion that this name was too mobile-oriented. So we went with Systemic War, a system-based war. There was a moment at the beginning of this year when I was reading your latest book, which in my opinion is the best book you've written. And I wrote to you on Messenger saying, Jacek, this game should be called Systemic War. Why are we calling this game Systemic War?
Precisely because, apart from being a name that truly reflects the very essence of what's profoundly happening in the world, it will comprehensively cover the significant period from 2008 to 2025, during which the player will have to skillfully navigate the complex transformation of the international system, representing a well-known country, potentially any sovereign country on planet Earth, and go through a systemic global war. So it is, par excellence, exactly what the player will indeed experience. A systemic war, meaning tensions that transform the rules by which states cooperate with each other. So it's difficult to find a more accurate name than what will actually be experienced.
Please, next question.
Major Sheikh Zalewski, head of reconnaissance, 1st B-Bands. I have a question for the RTS. What kind of force levels are you planning? Will it be company versus battalion, battalion versus battalion, or will there be an option to conduct a second echelon attack from the rear? My second question concerns the level of detail. How deep do you want to go when it comes to representing the battlefield conditions day and night? The previously mentioned engineering works, fortifications, minefields, the ability to detect and strike reconnaissance units carrying out tasks in support of our own forces. And a third question regarding maneuver and division. What do you have planned? What is your idea for the mechanics when it comes to moving and utilizing divisions, the potential for mobility, taking into account the necessity of river crossings, march losses, and enemy actions?
Your questions pertain both to the real-time strategy, RTS layer, and to the overall strategic layer. Because we forgot to mention in the previous question that it is possible, I would say, to fortify terrain, build fortifications, obstacles, and so on around cities. And generally, there are plenty of such points. In fact, as many as there are cities. The significant issue of marching, march losses, and everything else related to. In general, logistics in the broad sense is clearly represented on the strategic map and is later directly reflected in the potential of the units that engage in combat at a given point. And you can see this on the map, because battles take place not only in RTS style, but also on this strategic map, and that's basically how I play as well. And that's precisely where all these significant clashes of potentials truly take place. As for the terrain conditions in the real-time strategy game, they are represented exactly as they are, including all the various elevations. There's no night, right? We decided on that because it's hard to make for... Jarek will definitely explain it. It really is daytime indeed. There's absolutely no snow and certainly no rain, at least not in this particular demonstration.
Some simplifications have been made, so to speak.
There are some simplifications. These are clashes, and in the RTS it's at the level of each subunit. An infantry squad, one tank, then another, and a third, and so on and so forth. That's truly a clash on a tactical scale, which is indeed tactical, perhaps slightly operational, but predominantly tactical, with some significant operational consequences. When it comes to engagements at a much higher level, that's specifically the brigade level, with some detached battalions. When the Allies come, they often come to us in battalions, so that's precisely how it is, and that's how it's simulated, but you can certainly concentrate them. You can concentrate these units. I often do that myself, to obviously have greater potential in a clash. Those are my answers. I don't know if... Reconnaissance. In RTS, it's important. What?
I wanted to say that reconnaissance is present, it's very important, and...
There's also electromagnetic warfare.
Yes, but we even have two currencies in this RTS, and one of those currencies is called Intel, and it's used, among other things, thanks to this reconnaissance, or even by eliminating enemy reconnaissance units. We acquire this currency. For example, it is used to deploy more complex, more advanced units.
If so, you are here, you introduced yourself as being from the reconnaissance of the 1st Brigade. Well, actually, two of these maps, Pilika, is very good for battles against tanks and mechs. Of course, there's also the significant battle at Oratsky over the Rozpuda. It's a truly huge map, a truly enormous map, perfectly and ideally suited for this kind of thing. There is rolling terrain and there is also slightly rolling terrain. This is quite perfect for tank combat where there is constant movement, strategic maneuver and such on.
Please ask another question.
Good morning, Szymon Grabarczyk. I would like to ask what happens to the conquered nations? Because hundreds of years of history have shown, especially in the history of Poland, that nations usually don't like being invaded. Will there be some kind of resistance mechanic, and how will it affect stability, army quality, and so on?
For example, I'll say what will appear in the demo, because in the demo the player will be able to defend Poland, prepare for the Russian onslaught, but will also be able to take more offensive actions. Take action. and that will be an attack on Belarus. The consequence of that attack will be the democratization of that country. So let's also carefully take into account under what specific political regime a given nation is currently living.
However, to trigger the democratization action, it's not automatic. You have to play the hybrid war well, because it's not at all obvious that you'll even be able to activate that module. You really have to make an effort. For example, first you need to invite the Belarusian opposition to act at the right time. It would also be good if, in the final version of the game, there was training for opposition members. At the same time, you have to make sure that war with Russia doesn't break out too soon, and that you have time to prepare. Because if we escalate too quickly, the escalation points rise to 100 and it erupts. A kinetic war could break out, for which we might be unprepared without our units properly deployed, especially on the Belarusian front. Plus, you also have to take into account that Belarusian units will enter the war as well, during a defensive war, as soon as the Russians attack us. So there is a lot of complexity there, even already in the demo, which needs to be considered, and a lot needs to be done so that later, in order to launch this democratization program, first and foremost, you still have to capture Grodno and Brest. And then, to overthrow the government and install a new one, you still have to take Minsk. With the army, you have to seize it after a siege, and you can't just leave from there, for example, right away. So it gets used up pretty quickly, quite a lot of energy.
And in the demo, you can already take over the city of Königsberg, which, as you precisely described in your excellent book, could certainly be a viable option. Soul style, yeah.
The soul option, we're doing the soul option in this game. We'll probably expand it further in the full game, because there will be other scenarios where Poland will have more cruise missiles than in our demo, since that's not the case here. But we also have the ability to launch strikes already during the hybrid war, before the kinetic war starts. And look at that beautiful blockade of Kaliningrad by sea, air and land. And I even noticed then that the British, we get extra points because the British like it, and they're more willing to help us, because there are a lot of them. Mechanics where whatever you do has negative consequences for some and positive for others. And you have to navigate within that, just like in politics. It's not easy, I won't deny it. I was constantly checking to see if I was losing support. As you know, being critical about whether allies will come, I won't hide that I was constantly watching to see if I was losing the support of my allies or not. With every action I took, it's very interesting. I'm curious what impressions you'll have from the game itself.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are slowly approaching the end, so we ask for the last 2 or 3 questions.
Good evening. I would like to ask about the strategic layer in the full version of the game. How will it be a very changeable and dynamic course of events in the campaign, regardless of the player's actions? Is it possible that the first time I play this game, Ukraine might fall after a Russian attack? And on the second attempt, could it happen that Ukraine manages to hold out?
In the demo, we made it so because we wanted you to play the Polish war. That's what we did in the demo. So no matter what you do, Ukraine falls anyway. But the partisan resistance remains in western Ukraine, in the Lviv region, and in the Carpathians, which means the Russians have trouble projecting their power through Ukraine into Poland. What was actually the baseline scenario? That's really how it truly was in reality. Those were the fundamental assumptions, both Polish and American. So basically we started from the crucial point that this devastating war was very close to Poland in real life in the year 2022. And Ukraine saved us. In fact, I don't think we even realized that. The reality of it.
And as for the full comprehensive version, even last year we were already actively experimenting a bit with advanced AI for grand strategy, so that individual countries would make these crucial high-level decisions regarding their military and diplomacy in a very intelligent and sophisticated way. We'll see what comes out of these experiments, but if things go in the direction we're thinking, it's quite possible that every subsequent game will be a bit different, because we want to achieve high replayability for this game. Even now, when we were making the demo, at first we designed it in such a way that it was supposed to be very scenario-based. Driven that Ukraine falls, there's the Russian invasion, we're defending ourselves at specific points. But quite quickly we came to the conclusion that we needed to give the game a greater dose of sandbox elements, meaning that the player should decide whether to follow a defensive scenario or maybe a more offensive one, attacking Belarus or attacking Kaliningrad, or maybe trying to protect the Baltic states. So, taking into account this whole idea of sandbox gameplay, We definitely want the game to be replayable, meaning the potential for playing it should be endless and it shouldn't be something you play for, 20 to 30 hours and that's it.
Yes, I've actually played many times, as I just said, but what I want to say is that at first it was very difficult and I kept losing because you have to learn a bit about how our army moves. And once I learned that, I gained a lot of confidence, really, entering Belarus, Kaliningrad, and so on. So I encourage you not to get discouraged either after your first 2 defeats. Because I was absolutely devastated and even called Jarek like, damn, there's no way to win this game. Do something about this game.
But they didn't do anything, they just told me to relax. It turned out it's just a game, easy to learn, hard to master, and in fact after a while Jacek started winning. Alright, 2 more questions and we'll be wrapping up for today. Please, the next question.
Mateusz, a long-time player. I have here some important questions and valuable suggestions for very crucial features that, in my considered opinion, should be added based on my many years of extensive experience. The first is auto-skipping. For the RTS? Yes, indeed.
It's already there now, fully implemented. And we are auto-skipping the tutorial because we also have an extensive RTS-style tutorial where you can organize various maneuvers in eastern Poland as part of a comprehensive hybrid war scenario. That's the RTS tutorial and it's also skippable.
All right. The second thing is additional countries joining NATO or the BRICS bloc or Russia.
Yeah, that will be the final game, I think.
That's great. The third thing is a map of Moscow or the Smolensk Gate.
You mean for the RTS, right?
Yes, that was really very cool indeed.
I told you, Jarek, we actually have to do it because it'll get us our traffic on the Steam. On
Steam, exactly.
Of course, yes. Nukes and the truly dangerous radioactive fallout. Maybe even stealing some of those very powerful nukes from Kaliningrad. That could be really quite interesting indeed.
And here, let's just say, because we have this tension system, so the war isn't binary, it's not just yes or no, we have this diplomatic conflict. At the end, now we already have a kinetic war, but we still stick to the rule that if our actions lead to a nuclear exchange, then, well, we lose the game.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and let's have the last question, please.
Someone is raising their hand over there. I can see you even though we have these bright lights and you are...
You can clearly see us, but we can barely even see you.
Can you hear anything?
Yes.
Actually, my question was partially answered a bit, but I'll just ask anyway. If we burn down Kaliningrad, do we then lose immediately, really?
No, because there's an option. I don't remember exactly, but it pops up. You have to do certain things for it to appear during the hybrid war, and then you can choose which city to bomb before the kinetic war starts.
I don't even remember
what cities you can choose, but people pick Kaliningrad.
Yes, but you can pick Gusev. You can also pick others.
Gusev. So it matters because they have a logistics problem later in the real war over there. But that's not so easy to see. So that's already an insider tip for you, indeed, you could say.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming today. This was indeed the third event, and I sincerely hope that every single year in October we will organize such a wonderful event, and it will simply become an annual gaming event, perhaps one that will include not only our own games. Once again, please allow me to remind you, on Monday at precisely 7:00 p.m, the demo officially launches as part of the Dem Festival. Our goal is a peak of players, meaning 1,000 people playing at the same time. We kindly ask you to help us reach this goal, play yourselves, and tell your friends about it. And that's it. We are probably creating the most ambitious project when it comes to strategy games in Poland. Wish us luck.